Hi, I'm dream analyst Lainey Dolphin, and welcome to my Dreaminar. Do you wonder why you dream? In fact, when you dream, you're actually problem solving. And the dream is you having a discussion with yourself about a very specific current issue in your waking life that you're attempting to come to a conclusion about. And what I do is help people figure out what specific current issue triggered the dream. And once we know why you had a dream, we can find the solution, which actually appears right in the dream. And then you can take that solution, that metaphoric solution, and you can apply it to your current waking life issue. So whether you remember your dreams or you don't, you're still problem solving, but you sure get it much faster if you know how to decode what the heck you're trying to say to yourself. And so I'd like to introduce Randolph, who's going to share his dream with us today.
It starts right off with me sitting in some sort of a couch with Donald Trump and Barron and me, and Trump has his arm around both of us, and he's hugging me, and he's liking me, and he wants me to work for him, and he could not be sweeter, and I hate Donald Trump. So he gives me a gun, which I'd forgotten. He gives me money. And when he gives me the gun, in my dream, inside my dream head, I went, I swore to myself if I ever had a chance and got near him, I would do him in. But he was so nice, and I was so pleased. I was so happy that he liked me. And so he's walking me around, showing me things, and him and Barron's there the whole time. And then we go to a bus stop. And at this bus stop, he stops talking because some sort of a comedy slam has let out, a big comedy thing. And Lewis Black, who I love, is talking real loud, except it's not Lewis Black. It's not a very nice looking person. Not that Lewis is handsome. And he's going, I slayed George Shultz. I just slayed him, and went on and on about it. And Trump is just like leaning forward and not saying a word. And then these other comedians come up, so we're on the other side of where we're sitting, and it's Robin Williams and Buddy Hackett, both dead, and they're laughing about this thing too. And then George Carlin, who's also dead, comes up, and they're talking and talking. I don't know what they were saying, but again, Trump is just like fascinated. He's just like listening. He's not saying a word. He's just sitting there with me. And then it's like a bus stop. And then I find myself on a bus. I'm at the back of the bus, but the bus is going backwards, and I'm supposed to meet Trump apparently someplace, and I see my first stop, and the bus keeps going, and then I see a stop. I could get off at that stop. I could get back there if I got off at that stop, and the bus keeps going, and the bus just kept going. And that's the dream.
Okay, you understand that you and I right now are going to be searching for that very specific current issue that you're attempting to problem solve in the dream. That's that's what we're doing. And so one of the points of entry that's actually a sixth point of entry. It's called rote, and I don't know if you remember rote from school or not, but it's the way
I'm a teacher. I know what rote means.
Oh, okay. So for those who don't, it's like read it, write it, recite it. Read it, write it, recite it. And that's how we learn. And we use rote in our dreams all the time because if you don't get the message of something you're trying to say to yourself the first time, then you might get it the second or the third time. And so the dream might use different images and repeat them. And that's because it's trying to get in touch with you about what you're trying to say to yourself. And so when I looked at this dream, and we'll try other points of entry, but one of them that came to me was those comedians, and I love it that you said it also, some of the comedians you mentioned are dead. So they're from back in time. And so that's the word back. And then you say that the bus is going backwards. And so there's a repeat. And you also say that you're sitting at the back of the bus. So those are some of the clues where if it was my dream, I would already be asking myself, is the rote about a situation today that has to do with a person from my past? Or is it an incident that happened in my past that something today is making me feel in a similar way? So I'm not done yet, but I'm just giving you some ideas that you might want to think about.
Uh-huh.
You know, and then you also mentioned bus twice in the discussion. Once about the fact that you're sitting at a bus stop when the comedy show lets out, and then of course that you're actually on a bus going backwards. So now the other thing I might ask myself, using a symbols point of entry, is that when you described, I didn't get a chance to ask you, you offered the information, which is beautiful. You said that when you think about Trump, that you hate him, but he was so sweet, so he was just so nice, you say. And that would make me want to say to myself, what's going on in my life this week? And now I'm looking for a situation that's not only somehow connected to my past experience, but also I might ask myself, like, what happened to me, either a situation or a person that I thought I really am uncomfortable and that I hate. But actually, I realize I kind of like it. It reminds me of a dreamer I had not that long ago that was sleeping with a guy that she never thought she'd sleep with, and she was having the best time. And the dream turned out to be about the fact that she thought she would hate being on a boat, and her husband went and bought a boat, and she ended up loving it. And so she used the metaphor of sleeping with somebody that she thought she would never in a million years sleep with, and yet she's very turned on in the dream. And it was a metaphor for how she's feeling about being on a boat. And so that's a very similar thing, because you're saying that normally you hate him, but he's so nice in the dream that, so that you want to be looking, that might give you another clue to help us figure out what discussion you're having with yourself. When you say that Lewis Black comes out saying that he slaughtered George Shultz. And so I looked up, because I don't know those people, so I looked up on the internet. I knew the people that are dead, I knew, but I didn't really know Lewis Black. And when you look, but I have to check with you if your associations are the same, because we're not going by an internet a description of the guy, but it says that he simulates having a breakdown and he's very angry and belligerent. And about George Shultz, it says that he's the former director of the U.S. Office of Management and Budget. And he's also like 98 years old, so he's also...
He was Secretary of State for Nixon, I think.
Excellent.
Or he was something for Nixon. Big deal in the cabinet.
Okay, and so I'm just trying to help you connect, because, you know, metaphors like that, then it would make me want to say to you, are you feeling angry and belligerent about something in your life this week? So I'm just giving you stuff to think about. And if you could just, I always ask dreamers to name your first guess about what this situation in your waking life might be, because usually your first guess is the best guess.
Yeah. Well, I don't know how I cannot see how it would directly relate to the dream or the dream, but I'm in a real emotional state with my youngest daughter. We're not getting along at all. It's terribly unpleasant and belligerent. She's still my daughter. I still like, you know, take care of my grandkids, but I'm not getting along with her at all. Long distance, like just tooth and nail.
Okay. And so I guess, and she's belligerent right now. Is that it?
Oh yeah.
And how are you feeling about that situation?
About the same.
Okay, that's cool. I love honest dreamers. It helps the magic happen. And so there's a double thing going on there about belligerence. And does belligerence bring up some, I guess, there's this something between hate and sweet, and like someone who you think you hate is like sort of slapping you on the back and wants you to work with him and all that. And so I guess that's kind of what you're hoping for with her right now. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, well, she hasn't been sweet for about 25 years. And her older sister just today was trying to tell us both to be nicer, but like it just doesn't work being nice with her. She just turns on you. And I mean, I'm so glad that she's in California and I'm in New York, because I don't want to be around her right now.
Yeah, I'm just, but I'll tell you what I find, because I'm always looking for solutions once I understand what the dream is about. And I don't know about let's talk about polarities, because you said you're a teacher. Typically in the dream, because we are self-regulating organisms, and so typically the dream will present a polarity. And if I'm all the way over here on a subject, and then the dream is going to present something that's all the way over there. And so, and it's your subconscious trying to pull you somewhere in the middle of the polarity. And so if you feel like such a complete disconnect with your daughter, as much as you do with Trump. And by the way, I feel comfortable and happy that you've made this connection about your daughter. And the reason I feel so comfortable is because you have Donald Trump in the same dream as Barron. So we are talking about kids. And that's what the subconscious does. It's so completely sophisticated about the images that we choose. It's stunning. That's why I'm still as fascinated with dreams 45 years later. And so there's this, the polarity for me is how much you can't stand Donald Trump, and yet in the dream there's a hugging, and you're acknowledging how nice he is, and even he's offering you a job. So there's a coming together in the dream. When I see something like that in a dream, this is what I hope for. And the best example I can give you happened to me like 40 years ago, about getting somewhere in the middle. Not 40 years ago, I mean 25 years ago, when I was 40, and I was testing out expressing myself. And so I had a big argument with my husband one night, and he opened up that big rotten mouth that he used to have. And he yelled at me, and I said absolutely nothing. So that was my gross underreaction. And when I went to sleep, I dreamt about an aunt of mine who had already been dead for like 15 years. But when I asked myself very quickly, what are the first 2 or 3 things that come to my mind when I think about that aunt, I could tell you she had the biggest mouth. She was the most assertive person almost that I ever met. And if she didn't like you, she had no problem letting you know. And also, if she did like you, she would let you know. So I'm in my situation with my husband those 25 years ago. I'm not going to become my aunt and tell him where to get off. I'm not going to do that, because if I'm standing there shaking in my boots like I'm 7 years old and he's my father, I'm not going to become her overnight. But the fact that she appears in my dream encourages me to say something in the middle. And so what I did was I was able to say to him, Andy, the way you spoke to me last night, it really hurt my feelings. I don't like when you talk to me like that. It reminds me that I'm 7 and I'm with my dad again. And so similarly, I wonder if the solution to the issue with your daughter isn't this thing that's happening about someone like Trump that you dislike so much, and yet you're hugging each other in the dream. The guy's offering you a job. You're feeling good about him. And so you're not going to turn out feeling good about your daughter just like that, you know, after 25 years of you feeling like you're not being treated in the way that you want to be treated, but maybe you could move somewhere in the middle, which interestingly, your other daughter was suggesting. You said that she was hoping that you could have some kind of contact with her sister. Am I right?
Well, the other odd thing is that George Shultz worked for Richard Nixon. And I used to live in Washington, D.C., and I hated Richard Nixon just as much as I hated Trump. But by the time Nixon died,
right,
I had forgiven him.
I love it.
I said I can't, you know, he's just a sad person. He's been a sad person his whole life, and there's no reason for me to keep carrying this grudge. So I forgave him for, you know, for my hatred.
I love it, because the thing about us humans, which is one of the main reasons that I do dream work anyway, is that we have no control over somebody else and how they feel or the way they behave. It's so sad. But the good news is that the only person that we do have control over is ourself. That's it. You can only change yourself. And your response to someone, which is, you just gave such a rich description of how you hated Richard Nixon, and you're doing that in the dream with Trump. You're also forgiving and making friends, and you're allowing a hug to happen, and even to see that there's some niceness there. And I think that's the solution presenting itself. You're reminding yourself about tapping in to that same potential. I call it potential. That same potential that you have experienced in the past with Richard Nixon about forgiveness, because that's the part of your personality that you need to access at this particular time in your life. What do you think about what I'm saying?
I think it's perfect. In fact, I think I'll do something about it.
You are? I love it. And that would mean that the dream, that your healthy subconscious has really done its job. First of all, it caught your attention because that's the dream you picked to analyze. So that tells us that your healthy subconscious succeeded in getting in touch with you. And that's what the subconscious wants to do. That's why it gives us nightmares, crazy images, because it wants to point your attention. It's asking you to take care of business. And that's what you're doing. So it sounds like you're not going to be going backwards on the bus anymore. Sound like you're going to be moving forward, which is so uplifting. I love that. It's very got a lot of strength, that dream.
Yeah, well, I'll give it a shot.
Well, good for you, Randolph, and thank you so much for sharing your dream.
You're welcome. Take care.
Have a great day.
Bye-bye.
You'll probably notice when you watch the Dreaminars, not always, but it's typical that I will have afterthoughts after I get a chance to think about the dream and the dreamer. And so that's what I'm doing right now about Randolph's Trump dream. And I wanted to say, if you watched it, that one of the things I noticed is that since Randolph placed comedians in his dream, he might be giving himself the suggestion to access some humor and lightheartedness in approaching his daughter. And similarly, also, Randolph has Trump listening to the comedians. And the fact that he was hugging him may also be the subconscious's way of encouraging oneself to get closer to the part of you that needs to spend some time listening. Because that's what the thing is, that we all have all this potential, and there's certain aspects of our personality that are over-exercised, or Freud would have called them our habitual responses to life situations. And then we have under aspects of our personalities, which Carl Jung would have called your shadows. And the point about dream work, for me anyway, is to be able to have that incredible opportunity to access all the parts of yourself and use them depending on what situation you're in. And if we have an under-invested aspect of our personality, or I like to call it under-exercised, and you want to start exercising that muscle, the dream will present certain images to help you try and access that part of your personality that it doesn't matter if it's under exercise, change is possible. And so here we have a bunch of comedians appearing, and and even the suggestion that most of them are dead already, they're from the past, and maybe that's Randolph reminding himself to tap into his sense of humor and his lightheartedness again. And the same thing about the hugging and hugging Trump, who in the dream is not talking but listening to the dreamer, listening to the comedians, and maybe that might be a rehearsal. Literally, your dreams give you a safe place to rehearse, and he might be in there rehearsing about listening. So being lighthearted with his daughter, and also accessing the part of himself that knows how to open up and listen. That's it. Those are my afterthoughts. Have a great day.